National Catholic Register. This is Register Radio, bringing light and clarity to the news and topics that affect your life.
Well, Happy New Year. 2025 has begun, and it's shaping up already to be a potentially tumultuous year, politically and culturally. But it's also a year blessed by a jubilee for the Church. This week on Register Radio, we're joined by radio host and author extraordinaire Teresa Tomeo to discuss the Jubilee and her new book, Italy, Shrines and Wonders, Discovering Sacred Spaces, Fascinating Places and Destinations Off the Beaten Path. And then, Register Senior Writer Peter Laffin gives us a preview of 2025 for Catholics and political life. Hello, I'm Matthew Bunson, filling in for Jeanette DeMello this week as host of Register Radio, who's away. I'm joined here in Washington, D.C. by Shannon Mullen, Editor-in-Chief for the National Catholic Register. Shannon, welcome and a Happy New Year to you.
Same to you, Matthew.
Well, the year has certainly started with a lot of news, let's put it that way. But let's go back just a couple of days into 2024 and the opening of the magnificent Holy Door of St. Peter's and everything that brought with it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the beginning of a jubilee, the Jubilee of Hope. This happens only every 25 years, so it's a big deal for the Church. In fact, our current newest issue of the Register's print edition is really focused on the Jubilee. So it's going to be a jam-packed year of a lot of special events in Rome, especially.
And I know that there's a particular article that caught your eye, caught my eye too, from Hannah Brockhouse on the preparations in Rome for the Jubilee. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I've heard it said that the city of Rome kind of waits for a Jubilee to do its kind of infrastructure upgrades, and that is the case this time. So something like $5 billion of infrastructure upgrades, a lot of transportation upgrades, some street repairs and things like that. But there's some pretty remarkable transformations. I mean, things that well-known tourist destinations like the Trevi Fountain have gotten a major refurbishment, and there's new plazas and pedestrian walkways kind of leading into the Vatican. So there's a lot of physical changes in the Eternal City.
Well, I know somebody who knows an immense amount of Italy is Teresa Tomeo. And for the very few people who don't know who Teresa Tomeo is, she is the host of The Catholic Connection on EWTN Radio. She is also an accomplished traveler, an expert on Italy, and also is the founder of Tease Italy, a travel consultation company. And, of course, she's also a prolific author, including her new book that I was just mentioning, Italy, Shrines and Wonders. Well, Teresa, as we were thinking about somebody to help unpack a little bit more about the Jubilee, you immediately came to mind, because you've been to Italy so many times, you're an expert on this, but also I know that you've been reflecting on the Jubilee quite a bit as we've headed into 2025.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew, and so great to be on with you and Shannon as well. And it's incredible. I watched my husband and I on Christmas Eve, thanks to the wonderful cooperation with the Vatican, EWTN, and other Catholic outlets. We were able to watch that beautiful Mass on Christmas Eve, the Vigil Mass on EWTN, as the Holy Father knocked on those doors at St. Peter's and opened those doors. It was such an iconic moment, such a powerful moment. And I just said to my husband, I said, this is the eternal city, eternal because of our faith. And so many smells and bells, and watching that, I was just so grateful for my Catholic faith and the opportunity to be able to see this on television live as it was happening. This is an incredible year. As Shannon said, it only happens every 25 years. And the Pope, of course, can decide to have an extraordinary Jubilee, which he did for the Jubilee of Mercy, which was a few years ago, of course. But this is something really special. And, of course, the bulk of it will be in and around Rome. They've continued to open other holy doors since then, of course, going through the major basilicas and the prison outside of Rome. But what an opportunity. Even if you can't get to Rome, I'd really encourage people, especially faithful Catholics, to do more, to make sure they follow all of our outlets, to see what a Jubilee really means and the history of it in the Church. It goes back so far, of course, to the Old Testament, of course, with our Jewish brothers and sisters, but the history of it dating back to the 14th century with our own faith. So it's a phenomenal time for all of us to celebrate being Catholic.
Yeah, what's been the reaction of the Italians to this? I know that they have seen many a Jubilee, certainly since 1300, and Pope Boniface VIII, and they tend to have a somewhat, well, I wouldn't say laid back, but it's nothing they haven't seen before. So how are they reacting to this one?
Well, it's interesting. I think they're thrilled about it. Now, first of all, from a very practical perspective, you and I both know, frequent travelers to Italy, that COVID really hurt all tourism, but especially in Italy. And it really is coming back. The numbers are well surpassing 2019, which was a record year for Italy. So first of all, from a practical perspective, seeing more people visiting the churches, they're very excited about welcoming people, and Italians are very, very friendly. I think there is also an excitement, especially among the faithful. My husband and I, as you know, now reside part-time in Italy, in Umbria. And in the smaller towns especially, they're really embracing their faith in an even deeper way. We've noticed that. So many preparations, and even though obviously most of it is in Rome in terms of the big celebrations, they're really excited, and it's a spotlight on Italy, especially Rome, but it's a spotlight in Italy, and I think they're very excited. I haven't heard anything negative. That there may be a little bit concerned in Rome about the additional traffic and whatnot, because tourism will be up. And I've heard several different numbers. I've heard 30, I've heard 35, and then last month, my husband and I are members of the Vatican Patrons of the Arts Michigan chapter, and Monsignor Hogan from Rome was visiting our chapter, and he said to me that they're hearing at the Vatican it could be up to 40 people in Rome. So there might be concern, 40 million. There might be some concern about traffic and congestion, but overall I think there's a good deal of excitement.
Teresa, your book shares insider intel about some of the gems off the beaten path. The downside of doing that, of course, is you might create a new beaten path to those gems. But can you mention a couple of things that, if somebody does joins that 32 million people coming to Rome, that you'd really want them to kind of veer off the regular program and check out?
Oh my gosh, where do I begin? There's so many great places. Yeah, I think first of all, you have to plan ahead, obviously, to make sure you want to do the big things. If you've never been to Rome, obviously you're going to walk through the Holy Doors of St. Peter's. You want to go to the Sistine Chapel and the other major basilicas, St. Mary Major, St. Paul outside the walls, St. John Lateran. But I would love to see people go into some of the neighborhoods of Rome, Testaccio neighborhood, or especially my favorite neighborhood in Rome is Trastevere. And one of my favorite churches in all of Rome is Santa Cecilia, which is kind of tucked in the back away from the tourist area of Trastevere. And it's a very large church, and it even has a crypt below and little catacombs underneath and all these things related to Santa Cecilia. But that is the kind of place where you can kind of get away from the maddening crowd and have your own peaceful Jubilee moments to kind of venture off into that area. Now, if you wanted to go outside of Rome, there's so many wonderful places. You could do a beautiful day trip. And I would highly recommend, if you want to learn more about the history of the church, to head to Viterbo, which is still in Lazio. So you're talking maybe about an hour with traffic, maybe 90 minutes from Rome. But that is known as the City of the Popes. It is a gorgeous medieval village which has the actual place where they had the first papal conclave. Plus, it's a wonderful place. It's associated with Thomas Aquinas as well. And then also for something really unique and just utterly peaceful above it all, also in Lazio, and it's, again, a short day trip, very, very short day trip, maybe 90 minutes, again, under 2 hours. Go to the border of Umbria and visit Greccio. That is a beautiful, peaceful mountaintop town where St. Francis established the first live nativity scene. There's a beautiful cave where it happened, where he brought the people of the town together with the live animals. There's a gorgeous parish there that has a beautiful nativity collection. And then there's also the little actual town of Greccio, which has wonderful Italian restaurants. It really gives you a slice of Italian life. And I think that way it gives you the opportunity to go beyond the big city and to be like a St. Francis and have that reflection time or that pondering time and be also more like our Blessed Mothers. Those are a few suggestions I have, but again, I have a lot of suggestions in the book as well.
Absolutely. Not all of us are going to be able to go to Rome, of course, but you described the Jubilee year in the context of, making New Year's resolutions, but you call the Jubilee the ultimate opportunity for hope and renewal. And that's not just for people who are going to Rome, right?
Yeah, it's really, I think, a beautiful thing. You can obviously follow along. Again, I want to refer, not to give us a shameless plug, but our crews all over the world for the Register, for Catholic News Agency, for EWTN Radio and TV are doing a fabulous job of covering this from a number of different perspectives. So stay tuned to what we're doing and the articles that we're putting out there. But then secondly, start with your own diocese or archdiocese. I was talking on the air. I was interviewed by the CBS affiliate in my hometown of the Archdiocese of Detroit last weekend about what's happening with the Jubilee year. Our Archbishop, Alan Vigneron, kicked off the Jubilee year last Sunday with a beautiful Mass at our cathedral, Blessed Sacrament Cathedral in Detroit. And then he's also picked 12 sites in addition to the cathedral where people can visit in order of taking a local part in the Jubilee. And this is a really neat thing to do, to start in your own diocese and then to watch what they're doing in Rome, to follow along what the Pope is doing, obviously watching us, but also going to the Vatican website. But your own diocese has been encouraged by the Pope and instructed by the Pope to have their own Jubilee events. So you can make your own pilgrimage literally right in your own backyard. I mean, the different places that our Archbishop has chosen, the Archdiocese of Detroit, which is very large, go from north, south, east, and west. And many people may be familiar, for example, with Blessed Solanus Casey, who passed away in Detroit and was, of course, beatified not too long ago. And there's a beautiful Solanus Casey Center, which is one of the sites for our Jubilee event. So I think people might be surprised if they'd be like Dorothy, and maybe if they can't go anywhere in their own backyard, they'll find quite a lot there too. So check your own diocese or archdiocese, and of course follow along, even if you can't go to Rome, online and also with our different outlets.
Yeah, well, Teresa, I know we're just about out of time for this segment, but where can people find your book?
Well, they can go to the EWTN Religious Catalog. That would be EWTNRC.com. It's also available on my website, teresatomeo.com. And I really help people get it, Matthew. I put my whole heart and soul into this one. It's over 400 pages, and I'm so grateful for EWTN for publishing the book. And it will be available. It's available for pre-order now, but it'll be hot off the presses in just about 2 weeks. And they did such a beautiful job. There's photographs, there's recipes, there's celebrations. There's a story of how Dominic and I first started to go to Italy, and we're sharing our hearts. And also there's beautiful testimonies of people who've had profound religious experiences after going to Rome and Bella Italia. So I hope you pick up a copy of Shrines of Wonders.
Yeah, and don't be daunted by the 30, 40 million people who'll be in Rome. If you have a chance to go somewhere during the Jubilee, definitely go.
Yes, but I would say go toward the end of the Jubilee year. The crowds will be less. Like go in late fall. That's a perfect time to go.
Right. Oh, it's a great time to go anyway.
Yeah.
Well, Teresa, thank you so much, and congratulations on your new book.
Thanks to both of you and all the great work you're doing for the Jubilee year, but all around.
Well, stay tuned to Register Radio here on EWTN Radio. When we come back, we're joined by Senior Writer for the Register, Peter Laffin, to talk about what's ahead in 2025 in the political and cultural worlds of the United States.
Let's return to Register Radio on EWTN.
And welcome back. I'm Matthew Bunson, EWTN News' Vice President and Editorial Director, filling in for Jeanette DeMello today, who's off, but joined happily, very happily, by Shannon Mullen, the Editor-in-Chief for the National Catholic Register. And we're also joined by Peter Laffin, a senior writer for the National Catholic Register, who's been tracking throughout this remarkable election cycle of 2024 and now into 2025, all the events that will be leading to the inauguration of Donald Trump, his second inauguration. As all of us are aware, President Trump scored not just a huge electoral triumph in the election over Vice President Kamala Harris, but achieved what I think is already being called the greatest political comeback in American history. His return to the White House has many ramifications for the country, for the world, and for Catholics. To talk about all of that, delighted to be joined by Peter, as I said, who's been something of our eyes and ears on the ground, covering everything. First, Peter, thank you. I know that it seems a long time ago that you were at the Democratic National Convention, doesn't it?
It seems like 5 lifetimes ago. So much happened in the course of 2024 that I think I may have said this on the last show. It's a script that would have been rejected by Hollywood, and so it can seem tricky to keep up with what happened and what didn't. I was just speaking with somebody the other day about the assassination attempt in Butler, and they said to me, "Oh, I can't believe we forgot about that." And I said, "Yeah, that's right. That's just how the modern news cycle works. Any of the events of 2024 that, if they had happened on their own, would have been the biggest story in history, in modern political history. But they all happen to happen in a year."
Well, what can Catholics expect from this second Trump term? I know that's a bit of an open question, and there's a lot to talk about in there. But what's your biggest takeaway? What are you anticipating, especially for him to say on Inauguration Day and then his first actions as president?
It's an enormous question, and we are filled with so many unknowns, really for both political parties. But for Trump and his agenda, we're just filled with so many things that are first. His cabinet selections, we've talked a lot about how they've been unorthodox. We're not really sure how those parts are going to fit together. His agenda is also, very different from traditional Republican agendas. He's not a classic conservative tax cut Republican of days past. He's not a Mitt Romney figure. So it's very difficult to say how will this look when it all goes down, when it all happens. We can glean a few things from what he said he wants to do in the beginning of his term. On day one, he said he wants to repeal birthright citizenship and put in motion a plan to repeal birthright citizenship. And that is, should he do it? Should he use some of the mechanisms that he's talked about to do it? That's going to create some real moral dilemmas for American Catholics. Some other things he's going to attempt to do, he's going to attempt to extend his tax cuts from 2017, but those are also going to look very different than even his tax cuts then in a traditional Republican plan. He's promised to have no taxes on tips, for instance. He famously proposed that to win over the state of Nevada, very heavy in the service industry. He's promised to cap credit card interest, which has won him plaudits from the progressive left. He's also nominated Lori Chavez-DeRemer, who is basically a progressive economically, to be labor secretary. So his agenda is going to be different for a normal Republican. And, we're just going to have to see what order it comes out and how it fits together.
Peter, you're going to be doing a lot of reporting on the immigration issue over the next 4 years. And you mentioned the piece that you have on birthright citizenship in the latest issue of the Register. And this was one of the reasons why Trump had such broad appeal, his sort of get tough immigration pledges. But his plans appear to have put him on something of a collision course with U.S. bishops. Can you explain a little bit of why?
Yeah, so his plan to end birthright citizenship, which he's promised to do day one, puts him on a direct course with the USCCB, who has clearly taught that birthright citizenship must remain because it protects the interests of innocent children. And because the needs of the families, the considerations of the families, must always take precedent. So this is a very complicated story to unpack. You can see from a practical level why certain forces within the Trump movement, within the conservative movement, would want to end birthright citizenship. There's something like 250,000 children born per year in America from parents who are undocumented immigrants. And that's obviously unsustainable. And that's very, very tricky for a number of reasons, including national security. So something needs to be done. However, this particular track, ending birthright citizenship, it could have the effect, and this is what the church argues, it could have the effect of making all of the children involved in this stateless. And it would create a sort of permanent underclass of people born in America who don't have citizenship status. And it could also break up families And as we know, to be a completely holistically pro-life people, bringing families together, keeping them together, any way we can do that, needs to take priority. So it's two forces rubbing up against each other. One is this practical element that obviously our immigration system is broken and it needs to be fixed, and there needs to be practical reforms. But also, on the other hand, we can't do an evil to solve them. It's sort of like, it's not exactly like this on a moral level, but it has shades of the abortion issue. Many times people want to practice abortion, promote abortion from a practical standpoint. But there's a human life involved. There's a child involved in birthright citizenship. And our church teaches that needs to be at the center of our considerations. So for the Catholics who voted in Donald Trump, and Catholics were one of the most important swing votes to put him in, there's going to be real conflict and friction coming up if Trump decides to go forward with this plan. And it seems that he will very early. And the reason he will very early is because he does not need Congress to do this. He simply needs to write an executive action saying something like, we will restrict passports from children born to undocumented immigrants. And then someone will sue, and that'll be challenged, and it'll go to the Supreme Court, and we'll get a decision. So my hunch is this battle will begin very quickly.
Yeah, it really, for me, just to put a little bit of a plug for the Register, your reporting on this issue is a great example of where, there's a big Catholic dimension to this very large and controversial public policy debate that's going on. And, you're not going to see that in mainstream coverage, but you always incorporate that in your reporting and how you explain these issues. Let's just talk for a minute about the Democrats, because I'm interested. The party is kind of all over the map right now, and some are doubling down on the same policies that kind of contributed to their defeat in the first place. And so you see states like California Trump-proofing, their states. But others are acting as if there's some lessons to be learned from the election and Trump's broad appeal. So what are you expecting briefly from the Democrats as we get this Trump 2.0 started?
The strength of the Democratic Party in the Trump era has been that it never questions itself. And that's created like a police state within a party. If you question any of the more radical proposals, you were seen as maybe aiding and abetting Donald Trump in some way. And so the way that Trump won this election by winning a record number of Hispanic men, of black voters, young voters, it forces this conversation on Democrats. They have to question themselves now. And we don't know what the results of that questioning process is going to be. It doesn't even really seem that it's begun yet. It seems that Democrats are today, at this moment, in just a malaise. It's a very sad ending for the Biden administration, and you see the energy just so low on their side. Whereas the first time Trump was elected, they were out in the streets the next day, protesting, rioting, and now we're seeing none of that. And that's because it knows to be a viable force, it does need to have those changes. It needs to have those conversations. It needs to ask itself difficult questions. And what will be the result of that? Anybody could say at this point. A few things, though, that are important to consider moving forward of how a power structure might fill itself out in the Democratic Party and who these specific people might be. The Obama team, which has been very strong and very in charge of the Democratic Party for the past decade, they're on the outs. They are seen within the party as mishandling 2024 when they took over for Kamala's election. The Clinton people, one of the other legs of the Democratic Party, they're very old. they're aging out. James Carville is in his 80s. A lot of the people who are loyal to the Clintons just don't have that kind of pull anymore. But then there's the Bernie coalition, the progressive, the AOC group. Something really interesting is happening among that cohort. They seem to suddenly be suddenly open to the MAGA movement, suddenly open to Donald Trump, particularly on some of these economic issues. And even some of the left-wing news outlets are making something like a right turn or a populist right turn. You've seen some work in The Nation, in the Young Turks in the last few weeks that signals, okay, maybe progressives want to work with the MAGA movement. And so what is this going to look like in 6 months and 12 months? Oh, who knows? But it's really
Peter,
interesting to see the forces realign.
Peter, I know that you'll be there every step of the way covering it for us for the National Catholic Register and for EWTN News. So you'll be in our prayers. I know it's a hard road ahead.
Thank you, Matthew.
Well, that concludes this week's episode of Register Radio. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, for more news, analysis, and commentary, check out the National Catholic Register online at ncregister.com. Thanks again for being here on EWTN Radio. Until next week, on behalf of our producer, Michael McCall, myself, Matthew Bunson, and Shannon Mullen, Editor-in-Chief of the National Catholic Register, please take care and God bless.